Hello and welcome. It's Neil Dougan here, founder of TRIM. Today what we're going to be looking at is the processes around energy management, so how the energy is actually managed within our body. And you'll remember that in week 3 we were looking at energy consumption, in that what we were really focusing on is how we could take the energy stores that are sitting around our body, and that predominantly they're being held as fat, and convert that to active energy. We'll remember and we'll all understand, and certainly you'll really have sympathy with what I'm saying here, is that you can be carrying a lot of weight and yet still apparently have no energy. And this doesn't make any scientific or biochemical sense at all, because you're literally carrying around huge stores of energy with you. You should be perky and peppy and feeling up and energized and ready to take on the world. However, that is not the normal experience of most people who are carrying extra weight. So in week 3 we focused on actually how you take that energy and utilize it to make sure that the actual utilization of available energy is happening in an efficient and effective way. What we're looking at today in week 9 is how the energy is managed within the body. In other words, how the body makes the decision around where it's going to store the energy, how much energy it's going to store, and indeed how it's going to be taken back out of storage and utilized. So in other words, made actually available for the week 3 processes to occur. The first question we need to answer then is, why does the body have such diverse energy storage within its system? And to do that you need to have a little bit of an understanding of how sugar metabolism works and how fat metabolism works, and indeed the building blocks of the energy that are actually utilized. In other words, at the coalface where the cell's doing the work, what kind of energy source does the cell actually require at that time? How does that relate to sugar? How does it relate to fat? So the beginning answer to that question is that the cell utilizes a type of sugar called glycogen, as the actual sugar which is most commonly taken into the actual energy chain that creates whatever work, whatever cell rebuilding, whatever processes that are going on within the cell. All begins with a sugar, and it's quite a long way removed from the sugars that we're actually eating in our diet. So there's been, at the point where the cell's got that sugar, it's been converted many times into a great variety of more and more reactive sugars, if you like. They begin to not resemble sugars by the time they get all the way through to the actual point of utilization within the cell. However, nonetheless, sugar is really the key critical factor in here. So then you ask yourself, well, why doesn't the body just only have stores of sugar if that's all it needs? And the answer to that is once again complex, in that the cells do need a huge range of different types of fats actually for the cell building. So many of the components within the cells are actually made from fats themselves, and so therefore we have to have some fat available and in storage ready at all times, so that it can be converted to the right type of fats to actually use in the cell building processes. Secondly, sugar, particularly in that form of glucose or the variations of glucose, is actually quite poisonous to many of the tissues in the body, and so therefore the last thing that the body wants to actually have is massive amounts of sugar stored within it, because it's very toxic. So you have a piece of physiology that desperately needs to have the sugar available, and at the same time it is toxic to itself. So you can understand the tension that's going on in here. And a huge piece of work that actually goes on in the body is actually managing this tension of the inherent toxicity of the food source, and actually having enough of that food source coming in to sustain all of the activities of the body. It's a tremendous issue. And because of this tension and the potential for conflict that's going on there, this in fact is a really very, very nice target for us within TRIM. So we can look into the psychological components which could come in and interfere with the type of decision-making processes that we're referring to here. And indeed that's exactly what we do within TRIM. We go in and we focus on all of the psychological, all of the belief systems, all of the memories, and all of that type of mind and emotion level stuff, and we look at how that could interact with the physiological decisions that are being made. So on the one hand we have a wonderfully safe type of energy storage, which is the fat storage system, and on the other hand we have the actual useful energy storage system, which is sugar. And you'd be a little bit triggered by me saying this, because in our modern culture we're taught that sugar is bad for us, we shouldn't be having sugar. However, in this trim understanding of what we're doing here, it's all energy. And sometimes it's stored as fat, and sometimes it's stored as sugar, and it's stored as necessary within the body. The next particularly useful target for us within trim is actually what we do with all the excess energy. So we're talking about a lot of sugar being stored in the body, or a reasonable amount of sugar being stored in the body. Certainly enough sugar is being stored in your body at all times for about 12 hours energy consumption, or thereabouts anyway. Different people are different obviously, but a reasonable amount of sugar is being stored in your body. For people who are carrying a lot of extra weight, well then they're actually holding on to months and months of energy stores, deep energy stores within their body, and so clearly we're actually carrying lots and lots of this. There's an abundance of energy within our system technically, so long as we can get at it and get it so that it's useful to us. So just briefly, whereabouts is all this energy being stored around your body? Well, we all know about the white fat. This is the fat sitting underneath our skin, and to an extent it actually penetrates in amongst the muscles and other organs in that as well. However, there is an additional type of fat called brown fat, and this is the fat that wraps around the viscera, and there's a steady interchange between the white fat and the brown fat, and indeed we focus on that within trim, the actual exchange of this fat reservoirs between the two places. And then in addition to that, you actually have the fat which is being stored within the cells ready for use at all times. So each cell actually holds on to a certain amount of fat which it is capable of, in the form of which it's actually capable of converting into readily usable energy. So not all fats can be done that, not all cells are actually capable of making that conversion. However, there is this availability to a certain amount, and then of course the cells are also holding on to enough fat so that it can be doing all of the cell building processes that it needs to do as well. So the big question though is what can we do with all this abundant extra fat? And every day, even if we're being very, very careful with our diet, we're actually eating in new energy stores, and much of that's coming in as fat. And even if it's coming in as sugar, if there's sufficient sugar already within your system, then your body converts it to fat instantly anyway. So, what can we do, and how can trim actually approach it? So what we do is we actually look at the homeostatic level within the body, and what this is known as is the healthy weight index. So within trim we've created a healthy weight index, which is a relationship between body fat, body mass, dimensions, and also the index which is commonly used called the body mass index. So what we do is we take a combination of all of those factors, so the ratios and the relationships of all the different kinds of fat within the body, the body mass index, and then the fat relating to the body mass, the actual volume of the fat within the body. We take all of that into account, and all of it goes towards what's known as the healthy weight index. So within trim, at all times during the program, and it's being programmed into your body so that it lasts after the program as well, what we're doing is we're actually saying, here is an index body which you can compare to. This is the healthy weight index. The body then compares the activity that's going on within its system and says, well, you know what, we've actually got excess fat here at the moment coming in, so therefore we don't need to bring it into our system at all, or indeed the fats that we've actually got within our system in this particular part of the organisation are excess to our requirements, so therefore we're going to release them. So you can imagine that consciousness is around the idea of releasing, letting go, very critical here. So these types of consciousnesses sit in here while the body is actually viewing the healthy weight index. So there are a number of very well understood pathways for the elimination of excess fats within the system, and many of them actually involve the excretion of the fat through the digestive system, and indeed there's a whole range of ways in which we can encourage the body to be releasing and excreting without reabsorption these fats within the digestive system. The other huge aspect of that, of course, is to increase the rate at which we're consuming the energy within the body. And this can sometimes be looked at as being the basal metabolism, but there are many other metabolic issues there which can be turned up or turned down according to what's going on with the healthy weight index. So all of this requires the most incredible amount of communication to be occurring within the body, and we really are particularly focusing on the body and its functioning, but also the psychology of the body. So there's tremendous communication actually involved in it. One of the ones which is well understood, and we've talked about it before, is insulin management. And with insulin management, the whole purpose of it is to keep this toxic levels of the sugar at a manageable level within the fluids of the body. And so the entire purpose of the insulin system is just to manage it, to actually manage the levels of sugar which are sitting there and available at all times. So for that to work, it requires the most incredible levels of communication. The pancreas is sending information, the hypothalamus is sending information, all of the cells of the body are sending information. In general, the fat cells are sending information, the bones are sending information. All of this information is being fed all around the place, one to the other, and out of that becomes this decision-making process. So once again, we have this kind of focus on the idea that some part is speaking and another part is hearing, and to what extent that communication is being clear and uncluttered. An excellent example of that is another chemical called leptin. You may or may not have heard about leptin, but leptin is one of the chemicals which has quite a profound effect on your appetite. So technically when the leptin levels are low, then your body becomes hungry. So leptin is manufactured largely within the fat cells. So the fat cells are producing, when they're full, when the fat cells are nice and full of energy and got lots of storage in them, they begin to produce lots of leptin, and the appetite centers of the brain should be listening to this information and saying, stop eating. This is what actually should happen. If you're holding a whole lot of fat, your body should actually be saying to you, stop eating. Of course, something's going wrong with the system in nearly all of us, and so even when we don't need to eat for the very specific nutrients that we require, which would be a very good reason for you to be feeling hungry, is because I need a specific nutrient, even when that's not occurring, we still have an appetite, we still feel as though we should be eating. So these things are generalizations we're saying here, of course, and there are many cases for people within the TRIM program itself who, even though they're carrying a lot of weight, they're still, the leptin signals may or may not be working because they're definitely not feeling hungry. They don't have an appetite for food. And of course, these sorts of people drive the traditional way of viewing these things, the traditional science, that drives them completely mad, because how on earth can it be that they can be eating so little food and yet still be holding so much weight? Well, clearly we understand that in TRIM, and that's what we're working on. Okay, so what have we looked at today? We've looked at the way in which we actually utilize an index to give some information, context to the body so that it knows how to go about managing its energy. We've looked at how the body actually manages the energy itself, how it converts sugar to fat and fat to sugar. We've looked at how these hormonal or signalling systems operate within the body, and we talked a little bit about insulin, but it's only one of many. I'd run out of fingers on two hands talking to you about all of the biofeedback relationships that are occurring here. And we've mentioned a little bit about leptin as being the appetite control and just how dysfunctional that process can be. So I'm not sure if you've noticed, but as I've been making this video, I've been becoming very emotional, and I've just been away from the video recording process just for a little while, just to try and get to grips and understand why it was that I was feeling so emotional. And the understanding that is coming through to me is that this is the core of the suffering that occurs for people who are entering into TRIM. So you're watching this video and you're a person who is struggling with this weight management, and the suffering that goes with all of the management around this is so extraordinary for you, and the matter of being able to get some control over how your body is exchanging and storing and managing this energy reserve is tremendous, absolutely tremendous opportunity, and it's such a world away from what you've been experiencing in your everyday life. So the particular emotions that I was experiencing as I was actually talking about this material were emotions of overwhelm, of being powerless, of not having any way of actually being able to make any change to these kinds of things within our bodies. So what I'm picking up is this huge emotional content which is coming from you as a TRIM member, somebody who's working with the TRIM process, and all of this is leading to the sense of overwhelm within myself. Anyway, the wonderful truth of the situation is that within TRIM we've identified ways in which we can encourage the body through looking at the psychology of the body to make very, very profound changes to the way in which it is actually storing this energy, storing the fat. And you don't need to be locked into the old patterns, the old ways of the body actually managing these things. There's plenty of new opportunities which are actually coming out of the work that we're doing here together with TRIM. Okay, well, thank you very much for watching this video, and I appreciate you listening to me. Do follow the conversation that's going on the TRIM Facebook group, and contribute your thoughts and your feelings, and if, as you've been watching this, if you've felt any particular emotions arising, then please feel free to comment on them, and I look forward to catching up with you on the science video next. Thank you.